motorcycle cop pleads guilty in Ontario court to stealing hundreds of dollars at a traffic stop, and probably more than one, but they just got him on that one, and he's still on the payroll. Don't you think we should do something about this law and change it?
The 2008 summer games are underway.
They're messing with other charges. Breach of trust. That doesn't matter. He pleaded guilty. What's the problem here? Fire him. He gets no more pay. 416-872-1010. Let's go to London. Bill, what's your take on this?
Absolutely. He should, as soon as he's found guilty, whether it's a plea bargaining or not, he should be fired on the spot. If he goes through the appeal process, if he comes back to the appeal and found not guilty, then bring him back on.
And give him back pay.
No.
Well, if he's found innocent.
I don't know. I have no opinion on that. Several years ago, there was a Chatham police officer was found guilty of manslaughter. He, on duty, he choked a drunk, and he was found guilty, and he was on the payroll for over 2 years, pending his appeal.
Pending his appeal. See?
Pending his appeal.
I'd rather have it go the other way. It absolutely, the money stops, you're off the force, and the money stops. And then if a court should find that you have been completely, just misprosecuted, then deal with that aspect of it then.
I could understand where the police are coming from. Sometimes there's false allegations against them. But if they're absolutely found guilty by your jury of their peers, you're done.
Absolutely. And you know something, Bill, he admitted it. He just absolutely had him. I mean, they totally had him. So let's go to Chris in Waterloo. Hi, Chris.
Yeah, before I make my point, you can't stay drunk anymore in the province of Ontario. You have to stay alcoholic, impaired, or something like that.
Oh, well, excuse us.
We have this political correctness crap. Well, the point I'm trying to make is with the government as well. They are at fault, and so is the union. There's where the crime is committed. The union sets this up, that everybody gets paid. Doesn't matter if you're a teacher or a cop or anything like that, and the government keeps falling for it when they say, yes, okay, if something happens, we'll give you, we'll put you on, a year's leave, paid until something you're found guilty. This officer apparently pleaded guilty, so I don't know what the deal here is.
Yeah, he did. The deal is that they're still working on another charge, the breach of trust, and until that one is resolved, and the next court date is October the 9th, when he could be sentenced, maybe or maybe not, he's still on the payroll.
I would put the politicians on notice. Do not negotiate this kind of crap with the unions anymore. It doesn't wash.
I don't think it's unfair. 872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. Star Talk on your cell, star 8255. The rules ought to be amended. If you're an officer of the law, you break the law, you plead guilty, or you're found guilty, end of money to you. And Rita and Pickering and everyone else will be back after this. CFRB, keep the people.
Prove my case beyond a reasonable doubt. So they don't want to give me a forum on their show with millions out in the audience, telling their audience that their guy, the guy they love so much, George Bush, is probably guilty of first-degree murder and should end up on death row. So they're blacking me out.
Well, viewers, hang on. I just want to just put the stop sign up just for a few moments.
Yep.
Vincent, you and I both know how the game is played. If you were considered a whack job, if you weren't considered one of the most important, most successful, I don't mean to blow sunshine up your keister, but the point is you're a credible prosecutor. I don't care if you're talking to Dershowitz, Effley, Bailey, any of these people, any part of this country or the other country, your country, that I've worked in, you are credible. If you were just a whack job, you'd be on all of the so-called right-of-center talk shows and possibly the left-of-center talk shows, because they would tune you like a Ferrari.
Charles, what you just said right now makes you the fourth person. There are three other people in the over 2 months that this book has come out. Three other people told me essentially the same thing. And the first one that told me said it essentially like you said, and then the other two said it. Now you're the fourth person, so I have to use the number 4 now. And they said, Mr. Bugliosi, the reason you're not on these shows is because of who you are. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, if you were some nut, they'd have you on because it's colorful, entertaining. It would be dismissed. No one would take it seriously. But you're credible. You're serious, and there's a lot of fear involved. So you said exactly, and that shows insight, because I can tell you, hundreds of people have weighed in on why I'm not on these shows, and only 4, including you, said what you did, and you're probably right.
Well, by way of disclosure, I come at these things from a different direction. I'm not considered a left-of-center host either in your country or my country, but when people just want to bush bash just for the sake of it, and they are just whack jobs, I don't care if they're out there on the far right or the far left, the conspiracy mongers and what have you. I don't waste any time. I don't get off on shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, it's not a challenge. But when Vincent Bugliosi puts his considerable efforts behind find a book, and I know how meticulously you research. It doesn't matter to me which side of the argument you're on. If I've got the opportunity to have you on the air and to have our audience exposed to your mind and your advocacy, then I'm in.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Charles, because I can tell your audience that credibility means everything to me. My only master, my only mistress are the facts and objectivity, and I can assure your audience that if a Democratic president had done what I believe George Bush did, I would have written the same identical book. And I testified before Congress on July 25th, the House Judiciary Committee, and I told Congress, I said that at this stage of my career, I don't have time for fanciful reveries. I never in a million years would talk about prosecuting George Bush for murder if I didn't think there was more than enough evidence to convict him and that I was standing on very solid legal grounds.
Just one more question about the media, Vincent, and then we'll get right into the book. Every one of these kinds of books is lawyers right up. I mean, sure, you're a lawyer, but all publishers have lawyers. I'm assuming that lawyers have gone through this with a fine-tooth comb in order to prevent defamation. Is it possible, I'm just trying to give the devil his due here, is it possible that the broadcast networks, the CBSs, the ABCs, and all the rest of them, the cable networks, Fox, MSNBC, is it possible that any of them were fearing a defamation suit by interviewing you?
I kind of doubt it because we're talking about Bush and Cheney and Rice. These people cannot really be defamed unless it can be shown that the author knew he was lying and deliberately wrote a falsehood. So they're almost beyond libel. So that's certainly a possibility. And I have to tell you this, and it's a tribute to your insight. What you just said is a possibility. It's the first time. And all the people speculating on why I'm not on, it's the first time. You were the fourth on the other thing. You're the first person to raise that as a possibility, and I have to say in all candor, I hadn't thought about that.
And I was leafing through the book earlier this week, and I said to myself, if he had written the prosecution of, Joe Jones, convenience store owner, then there'd be some defamation possibilities here, but because Bush is such a public figure, the chances are that that's not in the works. All right, Vincent, let's get right into the book. I want to give you a chance to make your case. Why is George W. Bush, in your mind, you the prosecutor, why is George W. Bush guilty of murder?
Okay, well, in the book, The Prosecution of Bush for Murder, I present evidence, Charles, that proves beyond all reasonable doubt that Bush took this nation to war in Iraq on a lie, under false pretenses, and therefore, under the law, he is guilty of murder for the deaths of over 4,000 young American soldiers who have died so far in Iraq fighting his war. Now, let's not forget the over 100,000 innocent Iraqi men, women, children, and babies who have also died horrible, violent deaths because of Bush's war. But I was unable, in my research, to establish jurisdiction for any prosecution in America for the deaths of innocent Iraqi people. I did establish jurisdiction to prosecute Bush for the 4,000 American soldiers. Getting into some of the evidence, let me say off the top that I discuss some legal issues in the book, pretty sophisticated, some rather arcane, and I discuss them in depth. But the main legal issue, Charles, I can tell you, if this case ever went to trial, the main legal issue would be whether or not George Bush took America to war in self-defense, his so-called preemptive strike. He said that Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He was an imminent threat to security of this country, so we had to strike first in self-defense. If Bush could establish self-defense at the trial, then all of the killings of American soldiers in Iraq would be legally justifiable. However, Charles, if the prosecutor could prove that Bush did not take this nation to war in self-defense, but under false pretenses, then all of the deaths of American soldiers in Iraq would become unlawful killings and therefore murder. So let me give you some of the evidence now. We can't go over all of it. Let me give you some of the evidence.
Just before we do that, I just want the audience to...
Off ever, hold your peace.
George W. Bush, the defendant, in this case Bush, he doesn't have to prove anything. The burden of proof is on the state, so I just want to get that on the decks just to start with.
Very fine point. Very, very fine point. I'm not trying to compliment you unduly here, but I can tell you this now, that I haven't had any other host mention this legal sophistication. You are right, and I should have mentioned it. Bush does not have the burden of proving that he acted in self-defense, although he certainly would try to do that in this trial. The prosecution has the burden of proving that he did not act in self-defense. But the main issue is self-defense. Bush would try to show that, but you are right, 100% right. He has no burden at all. He doesn't have the burden to call any witnesses at all. The prosecution always has the burden of proof that never shifts to the defense.
And you've got to prove a negative. You've got to prove that he did not act in self-defense as he said he was, and that's a pretty high burden.
Well, you got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's why I say it's pretty high.
Yes.
I mean, it's quite the pole vault.
Justifiably so. Justifiably, because if you're seeking a conviction, someone away for the rest of their life, or perhaps on death row, you should have that high burden of proof.
What I want to do is take a break here, just for a couple of minutes to allow everyone to collect their thoughts. In just a few moments, ladies and gentlemen, one of the great prosecutors in Western civilization, Vincent Bugliosi. He's the man who put a number of people away, including Charles Manson. His new book is called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder. We've cleared the decks. The burden of proof is now on the state. In this particular case, for this role play, Vincent Bugliosi is the prosecutor representing the state against George Bush. We'll hear his file. We'll hear his case in a moment.
Injured. She says that he pulled a knife on her, and all of this, she says, happened after her daughter told her that this man in the park, her 10-year-old daughter, tried to pull down her pants and touch her. And the mother says she heard the story, she ran outside, picked up a pipe on the street, and confronted her daughter's alleged assailant, who was still in the park, and that she confronted him, and he stabbed her in the neck. Some woman comes up to me in a park and yells at me with a pipe in her hand, and I got a knife? What's the question here? You take one swing at me, I'm going to have to defend myself. But I have no idea beyond that, and neither do the police, the rest of the story. And my question to you is, who gets charged in this situation? I think the mother should be charged with assaulting this man. 416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. Star Talk on your cell, star 8255. Also, if you have thoughts, if you have feelings on children's stories, on the way things can go, because I sure didn't expect the calls that I've been getting about the stories that kids tell. But on the other hand, we have to believe them as much as we can when they tell us. It's a tricky situation. Let's go to Kyle in Whitby. Hi, Kyle.
Hi. All I wanted to say is, like, we have a judicial system in place for a reason. Like, people can't be taking all this vigilante justice. But anyways, my mother's from New York, Long Island, New York. I go down there often, and actually a close friend of mine, he was 18 at the time, I believe, and his girlfriend was 16. They were dating for about 2 years, and then they had a pretty rough breakup, so she cried rape. And he ended up spending 2.5 years at Rikers Island because she said that he raped him. And then it turned out, after this whole ordeal, he was acquitted because they found out she was lying and that she was making stories up and all this. But, you know, like, I don't know how these people can make these stories up and lie knowing what these other people face as consequences. It's sickening.
It is, and you've seen it firsthand. We have. Too bad. Thanks for calling, Kyle. That's really sad. Look what happens to people's lives, and we don't know if the mother's telling the truth or not. But that's the whole point. How enraged as a mother, as a parent, can you get legally when you start being aggressive against somebody else? What is forgiven? Are you forgiven this? Is this perfectly okay to pick up a weapon and threaten somebody with it? To hit somebody? I don't know. There's something about this. I mean, this is why we have trials. This is what it's all about. 416-872-1010, isn't it? 1-800-561-CFRB on your cell phone. It's Star Talk. It's star 8255. What's justified and what isn't? I don't know. I'm wondering if some of this goes beyond what the mother says. What if the mother actually knew this man? Think about it. What if there was no such incident in the park? What if it didn't even start in the park, and then it went across the street? There are so many ifs, aren't there? So many questions to ask. Who's telling the truth? Even though if everything about her story were absolutely true, loving parent or not, the woman should be charged. That's what I believe. She had no right to take justice into her own hands. And this is directly the opposite of what my colleague Jim Richards was saying this morning at 11 o'clock. So this is why I decided to go ahead and introduce this to you. Because he thinks that you can get carried away as a parent and just go nuts. And I'm thinking, no, that's why we have courts and juries of our peers who hopefully take everything into consideration and reach a fair, informed, and unbiased decision. And pretend you're a cop and you just show up. You're a police officer and you show up and you see this brawl in the park. Are you going to tell the woman, it's okay, you were under a lot of pressure, your daughter told you that she had been assaulted, or that he had tried to assault you? You can't do that. You absolutely can't do it. And listen to what we've learned. Listen to the false stories that have been called in here, and the tragic consequences. Every story has to be taken at face value. Everything a parent says. And You love your children, and you would die for your children. But you can't place other people in a position where they would die for your children, too, assuming the story is correct. And we have 1 whole minute if you're fast and you want to call. And Glenn is fast. And he's on the 401. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, how are you this afternoon?
Does this make sense to you?
Well, the way I look at it is if you're gonna have somebody take a chance and beat somebody because they've done something, even our justice systems nowadays don't look at it and say things like, they give them the benefit of the doubt and put people away. So you're better the devil you know than the devil you don't know.
So you're saying what?
Well, what I'm saying is, like, if she thinks that this is going to happen and it's happened to her daughter, then, I mean, she's just seeing red. And
right.
You know what? And she's going to have to deal with what happens. But the chances are, if this guy's sitting there in the park and he's got a weapon anyway, what was he doing there with the weapon?
Well, what's she doing there with the pipe?
Well, she went out there to protect her daughter, obviously.
Her daughter was already safe. Her daughter was in the house.
Yeah, but the other side of the coin is, you know what? Even if she does call the cops and the cops come in, this guy's going to be back on the street in no time. Our judicial system doesn't allow for things like revenge, and sometimes revenge is sweet.
Oh, I know, but sometimes it's illegal, too. In fact, most of the time it's illegal, Glenn. That's an interesting point. I think she should be charged. We're going to watch with interest and see what happens. We'll take a break. And when we come back on News Talk 1010 CFRB, they're doing it in Alabama. You too fat, son, you're going to have to pay more for your health insurance. Why can't we do it right here in Ontario?
Islamic fundamentalist who wants to die a martyr death because he thinks, there's a harem of beautiful women waiting for him. Hussein wanted to live, and this is perhaps the reason why all 16 U.S. intelligence agencies said, hey, we believe this guy has weapons of mass destruction, but he is not an imminent threat to security of this country.
Vincent Bugliosi, let me just throw an assertion at you, and you can bat it out of the park, do whatever you want with it. In the days after 9/11, there was an enormous appetite on the part of a lot of people for payback, and payback meant not just going after al-Qaeda outfits in Afghanistan, but after a serious Arab country. Saudi Arabia was not going to be that country because that would have driven the price of oil through the roof. Iraq became that Arab country.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bush told 2 main lies in leading us to war. The first lie was that Hussein was an imminent threat to security of this country. The second lie that Bush told the American people, Charles, was his unmistakable innuendo and implication that all federal intelligence agencies and all federal investigations said that Hussein was somehow involved in 9/11. But they didn't. Hussein was involved with al-Qaeda in 9/11, according to George Bush, which we, of course, know was not true. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the 9/11 Commission, they all concluded that Hussein was not involved with al-Qaeda in 9/11. At the time of 9/11, only 3% of Americans in an open-ended poll believed that Hussein was involved in 9/11. They gave the answer when they were asked, who do you think was involved in 9/11? 3% said Hussein in Iraq. Yet we know that it wasn't long at all before the vast majority of Americans came to believe, Charles, that Hussein was involved in 9/11. Now, if it wasn't Bush and his people who were responsible for this suddenly widespread misconception, then who was it?
Vincent Bugliosi, we're going to put that on pause and be right back to wrap up. Vincent Bugliosi, the Los Angeles prosecutor, in this book, his latest bestseller, The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder.
If he was of the view, and a reasonable person was of the view, that individual was going to inflict something, harm upon her that could cause her death or grievous bodily harm, and she had a gun, and she used it, I would be happy to defend her. I would say that she has a reasonable defense to protect her life. If a police officer is attacked when attempting to arrest a criminal or an alleged criminal, and that criminal takes a knife and attacks the police officer, and he shoots that criminal, I would submit, would have certainly a strong argument that he acted justifiably in self-defense.
Mr. Gravetsky, under our system, she has a choice. The defendant does if the prosecution chooses to prosecute her. If the Crown wants to do that, she has a choice. She can have a jury trial if she wants. Can you imagine any jury convicting convicting a mother who goes after a man who allegedly tried to sexually assault her daughter?
You know, that's an interesting question, Charles, because the answer is I would doubt it very much. And that's why the Crown is given a discretion in who they prosecute and why they prosecute. You know, the criminal code is set up, but it's not a machine and it's not a computer. There still has to go through the human element, and that is the discretion of a competent Crown attorney who analyzes the case and determines what is just. I had a case many years ago out in the country where a baby was sexually assaulted in the back seat of a car by an alleged friend while the parents were driving the car, and they happened to look in the back and see what he was attempting to do. And the father pulled the car over, told his wife to go and get the RCMP, and he took the man out of the car and administered a severe beating on the man. And fortunately, the police came and arrested the man. And he was also arrested, but later the charges weren't pursued against him, although they could have been for aggravated assault. But the discretion of the Crown was not to pursue the charge.
The conversation that takes place among the Crown prosecutors, I mean, one of the first questions they ask, what are the chances that we can get a conviction? And if we don't have a very good chance of getting a conviction, we're not going to lay charges.
That's correct. And in the scenario that you've described in this particular case, I would say that if I were defense counsel for this, and this lady were charged, and she had a right to select a judge and jury, depending on the nature of the charge. Certain offenses, you don't have that right. But if she was given the right to, I certainly would, as her lawyer, I would definitely select a judge and jury, and that may dissuade any prosecution because the likelihood of a conviction in that type of circumstances would be slim, even though the law may dictate a conviction.
How does publicity, pretrial publicity, affect things, Mr. Kravetsky? Everyone in the country is now being made aware of precisely what happened here.
Yes.
How would that impact on a prosecutor's decision to go for or not go for a trial?
Well, I don't think the prosecutors are too much swayed by what the media exposes as facts or what the people believe to be the truth. I think they rely solely on what evidence they have before them to make the decision. But if the evidence they have before them substantiates the facts that we've been given, and the media, and there's been a lot of exposure, public opinion obviously has a bearing on any prosecution to some extent, as we've seen in Winnipeg over the last several months. And I think that would have an effect. We're all human beings, and I think that the exposure that this case has had may very well, if the facts that the media have relied upon are true, affect the Crown not to proceed. But I think they wouldn't proceed against her if they felt they weren't likely to get a conviction on these facts in any event.
No, I don't think that anyone's going to prosecute her. One of the quotes from her is, "I stopped because I was almost going to kill him." This is the woman who was holding the pipe. She said that the sound of the pipe was hitting the man's skull. It made her cringe. She says, "I stopped because I was almost going to kill him. I shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have hit him with the pipe. I should have called the cops, but I was just so mad that he tried to do that to my daughter." Now, naturally, the police take on this is that people cannot take matters into their own hands. They shouldn't be doing this. They're not calling for her to be charged or anything like that at the moment, and I don't anticipate they will. But here's my question to you.
Yes.
When someone listening to this program is saying, hey, this is the only way to get justice, too many people have had too many good lawyers, and they've gotten off, people are getting off with murder, you hear that expression all the time. That's the environment out there that creates the desire on the part of some people, regardless of what the circumstances are, to see if they can get it done on their own.
Yes. This is an emotionally charged issue that, people are all, when it affects them personally, it becomes a different issue. If it's their child or if it's their spouse that suffered some type of humiliation or injury as a result of another individual's acts, they want to go out and administer justice. That may very well be a natural feeling, but we still are in a civilized society, supposedly, and we have a court system to deal with these things. And objectively, as an officer of the court, I would say to people that are listening, that would be a very, very dangerous dangerous thing to do, and it would put us into a very bad state, because we are a civilized society. We expect our police officers to be civilized. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. And we also expect the people that are victims of crime to administer and to adhere to whatever laws exist in the country. Otherwise, we'd have anarchy.
Mr. Kravetsky, I'm going to ask you a question that you're not going to like, but I know that as an officer of the court, you're going to answer the question whether you like it or not.
Yes.
Let's say she didn't get a number of people together and visit this man's skull with a pipe. Let's say she had called the cops. Let's say the cops had arrested him. Let's say he had gotten a lawyer, the man who allegedly tried to sexually assault the daughter.
Yes.
And let's say the lawyer was you.
Yes.
Would you put the 10-year-old on the stand?
Well, it wouldn't be up to me. It's up to the Crown to put their witnesses on the stand. The question would really be whether I would be prepared to do my duty as a lawyer, and could do my duty to the best of my ability to defend my client. Remember, lawyers aren't judges. They are lawyers, and they swear an oath to do the best possible job ethically that they can for their clients. In criminal law situations such as this one, a lawyer has a decision to make when the client, let's say that man came to me who's charged with this offense. I have a decision to make. My decision is, can I ethically give him the best possible defense? Can I stand up and cross-examine that 10-year-old if I have to the best of my ability? If the answer is, my conscience or my personal feelings will not permit me to do the best possible job and cross-examine that 10-year-old like I would a police officer, if it was him testifying, then I would be obliged ethically to tell that accused person to go elsewhere.
Well, the reason I asked you if you would put her on the stand is because there's an assumption in that question, and the assumption is that the prosecution doesn't want to put her on the stand, and so as a defense lawyer,
yes,
calling witnesses, I'll re-ask the question, would you put her on the stand?
Well, she wouldn't be my witness, she would be theirs.
No, I understand how it generally works, but if they didn't want to put her on the stand, and you felt that a withering cross-examination of a 10-year-old might make them lose the case because she wouldn't be reliable, and you could do all the things that talented defense lawyers like yourself can do. You could confuse the witness, you could get her distraught. The point is, would you put her on the stand if they chose not to?
Yeah. If I felt that I could do the proper job and I'm giving my client the best possible defense, and if that would help in the hypothetical case that you've given me, yes, I would.
Neil Kravetsky will continue the conversation in just a few moments. He's a defense lawyer in Winnipeg, which is where a woman took a pipe to the head of a man who tried to sexually assault, according to her, her 10-year-old. In a moment.
You're listening to After Online with
One still very busy from Dixie. Next up, 4 topics. Toronto.com. On a hard-working truck, you don't have to work hard for. Get the lowest.
This is Adler Online with Charles Adler. Learn a little, laugh a lot on the Chorus Radio Network.
For those of you who follow politics in this country, you know that the words hidden agenda are not unfamiliar to the Liberal playbook, and the hidden agenda can mean lots of things, but one of the things hidden agenda generally means is abortion, and the Liberals will...
We still kind of give leeway, but definitely you need like a 2006 or 2007. Now, I know you do have a large portfolio with us. However, I need to prove that you did file your taxes, because the bank needs to know that you don't have any taxes owing and that everything is fine, and it shows what your income is that you declare to the government. So you need the tax assessment.
Okay. What if I was able to actually give you a copy of my what the accountant prepared to send in to them?
For what year?
For this year and last year.
Did you file for 2006's taxes?
Yeah, like we're doing them all together, but the money, I mean, in terms of, so I can give you copies of that. Yeah.
You have 2005 notice of assessment?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. But that's, like, I think if we're talking about the present and how much money I owe now or don't owe now, and how much is in my portfolio. If I could give you 2,000, yeah, I can give you copies of what the accountant prepared.
Okay, how many years of back taxes are we talking about?
3 years? Yeah. No, I haven't. No, I haven't. No, I didn't really have much income until my mother passed away.
Okay.
In fact, they owed me money.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the tax returns. When is the accountant going to actually submit the return?
Well, I can do that soon, but if I give you a copy of it, like if we're talking about me trying to get pre-approved, you know, I guess the whole point is, nobody ever told me that I would need some sort of need this kind of thing. Even in our last conversation, you never mentioned it.
Yeah, I need some kind of income verification. Well, everybody files their taxes normally on an annual basis, so it's not unusual that we would be asking for the information, because 9 out of 10 times they would have it for me.
Right, okay, so this is the 10th time. But what I'm saying is...
So I can take a look at it.
Okay, so if you get... Yeah, okay.
Are you going to be doing a phone conversation, like a meeting with Doris and Jen next week, or are you going to see them in person?
No, I'm going to be talking on the phone with them. Like I said, it's not comfortable for me to go out right now. And, yeah, but that's... And you understand that that's the stress I've been going through here. So it's also cheaper for... Jen's always talking about saving me money. It's cheaper and easier just to do it on the phone. But what was your concern about that, or your question?
No, nothing. I thought if you were dropping by, then you could drop off those returns for me.
Would you... Okay. Yeah. Right. So then you would make photocopies of them, or okay. And but you're saying legally you don't. It's part of the application process, but can it still go through without that, or no? Or so you're saying I could never get pre-approved for a mortgage anywhere. Nobody will do it.
I can't comment on the other banks, but we can't do it if you don't have any kind of proof of income. To show income, and that's the only way for you to show me what the income is that you declare.
Okay.
That's the fact that we need to make sure that all the taxes are paid and up to date and filed.
Okay, so you can't buy anything. You can't... Okay, I hear you. So you're saying, no, this is part of the problem. Is there anything else I would need to provide that I'm not aware of?
Well, for the pre-approval, we need income verification. That's the only thing. When we actually find the property, we have to do an appraisal on the home in order to make sure that that is a valid price that you're paying, and there will be an appraisal fee that would be applicable, which is $250. Because you're a private banking client, we waive that. So there's no actual cost to you in setting up the mortgage, but we do need to do an appraisal on the home to make sure that the home is a valid home and that we can put a mortgage on there.
Okay, and...
When you find a house, okay, you need to put conditional upon financing for a certain date. Even though you have the pre-approval, the pre-approval is not a firm approval. The pre-approval only gives you a little bit of an overview and approximately how much you can get in the form of a mortgage, but it's not firm. Don't put any conditions on the purchase, which I'm pretty sure that your real estate agent will tell you. I don't want you to end up buying a house and all of a sudden you can't borrow the money for it.
Right, that's why I wanted to get pre-approved. But so, can you tell me what rate or what your bank would do for me on the phone, or what do you need before you give me that information?
Interest rate, I can tell you what it is, but you have to know what the mortgage term means and what a mortgage amortization is.
So.
Terms, for example, you can choose 1 to 5 year terms, and that means that if I do a mortgage for 1 year, you will be locked into that rate for the 1 year. You can't pay off the entire amount. Do you want to do a mortgage, or do you want to just take the investment money and just buy the house?
You mean buy it outright?
Yes.
What would be the benefit of that over a mortgage?
If you buy the house outright, you don't have to pay any interest to the bank. But then, if your account falls below a certain amount, Doris is not going to be able to look after the account for you.
Right, and the money that that if I kept money invested with her, it'd be getting a higher rate than if I just bought, right? So buying something outright might not be the best choice.
Might not be the best choice, but you have to kind of figure out, is paying the interest on a mortgage ideal for you?
There's a lot of things to think about here, eh?
Lots of things to think about. It's not just like where you rent and you go in and you move in and that's it.
Okay, right.
How about you talk to, when are you talking to them?
Thursday from 12 to 12:30.
Well, how about you talk to them and then you call me back and let me know if you have any additional questions.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, okay. But, okay, thanks for helping me understand how complex it is. But you're saying, okay, so once I could get pre-approved, then I could get an agent, or some agents, I'm not sure what, if an agent, or this other agent, hello? She never asked for me to be pre-approved or never signed a contract. So I'm not sure even what the best situation regarding an agent is.
Definitely need to get a pre-approval before you start looking for a home.
That's what one agent said to me. She said, how can I be sure of what you can afford until you prove it to me?
Correct.
Oh.
No. How do you know what you can afford until you see the pre-approval?
Well, because I know what I've got there at your bank, and I've got some still from my grandmother's estate, and I know that I only owe very little in taxes, so I know that I don't have any major...
How much are you paying in rent right now?
Right now I'm paying, well, $1,200 here and $1,275 the other place. So that's why I want to, I mean, if I put those two, I could get a mortgage, I could pay, $1,200 or $1,300 a month, or $1,400 a month on a home, and I'd be in a better situation.
Right. So we know that you can afford about $2,400. Definitely don't want you to pay that much because really you're only supposed to be paying rent for one place, right?
I know. That's why if I don't give them money into rent but into something I actually own, it wouldn't be going away.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I don't want to be paying this amount. You're right, and I'd rather have something that I feel safe in, where I can put my own locks on, and a security system or whatever, different things to make me feel safe. That's the most important thing for me. So, anyway, thanks for explaining this stuff about the pre-approved mortgage, and I'll see. Yeah, I'll figure out what to do with these. With these tax forms, because I got to get them in anyway, but I owe very little, so it's not, I mean, that's been, I gave everything to the accountant, so, but I needed, there was a couple things I needed to speak with him about before I sent them in, but I haven't been going out, so it's a bit of a delay. Anyway, so, okay, so I guess we should speak next week and figure out where I'm going to go from here, but...
I hope to talk to you by Friday, because I'm going to be on vacation for 2 weeks. September, the first week of September.
Oh, no.
Speak with Doris and Dan. Give me a call.
But while you're away, do you have somebody taking your place?
Yes, my assistant is around.
What's her name or his name?
Rosetta Henry.
Okay. I was confused. One of your earlier messages said if I'm not here, then contact Rosetta. But she's on vacation now too, so I didn't know who to reach.
She's on vacation, so did you press 0?
No, I just was getting frustrated. It was a personal question about the mortgages and stuff, and I figured...
That was yesterday. Today, I just said press 0.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so she's back. Oh, she's not there. Okay. That's fine. So, that was weird, because today it was on earlier, but anyway, I guess you changed the message.
I'll just change it right after you called in.
That's fine, yeah. Okay, so things are coming together, and if you can share this information with Doris, then we'll be, I guess, more on the same page. But yeah, I need to find a safe place to live, and that's my main concern, And and renting has been difficult. So if I can buy something within my price range, but find a good situation, then I'd like to do it. Okay, thanks again. Take care. Bye.
Who just doesn't want to be there.
416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB, Star Talk on your cell phone. If you're not going to get better, if your quality of life has gotten to the point where you don't want to live anymore,
shouldn't we provide people with an outlet to end their own lives that doesn't involve violence? Because really, what are your options? You find out tomorrow you're terminally ill. Legally, you can't do anything in Canada. You can go other places, I guess. There are other countries that have doctor-assisted suicide, but not here. No, here your options are what? Step in front of a subway, jump off a bridge, get a gun if you're physically able? Or in my relative's case, where because of the physical problems caused by the strokes, that's not an option. So they tried to use a shoelace to end it. How is it civilized to keep this going on? 416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. They don't want to live anymore. They're in their 90s. They've lived a good life, and it is going to be a slow decline now. Why can't they just be provided with an injection that would end it peacefully? We would do it for a dog. That was this person, my family member, that's how they expressed it. If I was a dog, you'd put me down. 416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. Mark in Toronto, you're on News Talk 1010.
Yeah, hi. How you doing, Robert? Listen, my mother expressed the same thing to me. That she was sick a good portion of her life, and she said if she was ever in that state, she would, not want to linger. And she didn't. I mean, we were lucky enough that when she passed away, there was hope that she was going to recover, and she didn't. And I'll be honest with you, when she passed away, I was somewhat relieved because I did not want to see her in that situation. Very similar to what you're talking about. It's heartbreaking, and all I can tell you is my heart goes out to you, and I agree with you 100%. Why we live in a society where we are able to prolong people's lives a lot longer than what we used to. So where do we get off with our moral high-horsedness, I guess you could say, to say, you know what, now that we can provide this treatment and make your suffering even longer, we're morally bound to do so. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and this person's been able to sign their own do not resuscitate order, so if anything happens, they're going to let them die. But they're not going to make this as a society, we find making it an easier passing. Somehow that's wrong. Okay. I understand that legally and logistically there would be some difficulties in setting up a system to make sure that people weren't being murdered and that families weren't trying to bump off old relatives. I get all that, but there has to be a better solution than being left in a nursing home wanting to die and having no options that don't include doing yourself physical damage to try and end it. And now we wait to see what happens next, because this person's not getting happier, they're not getting better, and we've already had one serious attempt to try and end it. It just seems to me totally inhumane. 416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. Shannon in Toronto, you're on News Talk 1010.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, Shannon, how are you?
Good. When I was young, about 9 years old, my mother was dying of cancer, and it got to the point, where she couldn't walk, eventually to the point where she couldn't speak, and then to the point where she was barely conscious at all, but in a lot of pain. She was on morphine, large doses of morphine, and when it got really close to the end, and she was still in a lot of pain, the family got together, and yes, it's kind of illegal, but the nurse gave her an overdose of morphine to help her go.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, I've always been in favor of euthanasia, and yes, I know there'd be logistical problems with setting up that kind of system.
It would be hard, so we won't make a law for it, because that's what we do in Canada. The abortion thing, kind of tricky. Let's just let people do whatever they want. Okay. How about you just come up with a system that works? There are other countries that do it. I understand there could be a downside. I think we're probably smart enough to figure it out. If someone is mentally aware enough to make the decision and is terminally ill, what's the problem? 416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. Robert Turner in for Ryan Doyle at 741. Time now to head into the CFRB all-day traffic center. Just the one problem on the main.
Euthanasia, it's not that simple. I'm not saying it's something that should never be done. But it's, when I was your age, God, I thought if this happens to me, I want to be dead. Believe me, when you get to a certain age,
yeah, I understand that.
Simple.
But my relative's over 90 years old. The doctors have said, they all agree, this is not going to get better. They don't want to live this way. They want to be able to die on their terms.
But can you put it on a doctor to kill somebody?
I think you can put it on a doctor who's willing to provide medication to someone who can then end their own lives.
But it's not that easy.
Well, why? Why is it so hard?
I'm against it.
Because the doctors, because of the papers my relative has signed, the doctors will stand there and watch them die because they're not supposed to jump in.
Yeah,
because they all agree,
yeah, that's what it is. No heroic. I don't, I found, like I said with my husband, I found it's a lot more complicated than we think.
Well, I know it's complicated, Judith, and I thank you for the call, but the complicated part, the simple part for me is I have a relative who doesn't want to live anymore, and that seems totally reasonable to me with the limitations now placed on them. Their mobility's been affected. They've lost their independence entirely. They're now in a long-term care facility. They're not coming out. Things are getting worse, not better. This is going to be slow. It could be agonizing. And they would like the option that we would give to the family dog. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I think it's unreasonable to make people suffer because we have some moral problem with providing them the means to kill themselves in a peaceful manner rather than forcing them to try and do it violently. 416-872-1010, 1-800-561-CFRB. More of your calls in a moment. I'm Robert Turner in for Ryan Doyle.
If you're in your car right now, turn around.
And it was a slow, steady decline. She did not have the ability, though, to make the decision to end her own life. So I think in that situation, you make the decisions that are best for her, keep her as comfortable as possible, but you can't choose to end another human being's life that way. In a case, though, where someone has their own the decision-making process still intact and can say clearly, this is why I want to die, and doctors can look at it and say, yeah, this isn't getting better, this is not going to be an easy ride, then I think we can come up with a system. You get a few doctors, a judge in a room, make sure there's someone to advocate for the patient. Yeah, it would cost some money, but I think it would be worth doing. Because what you're left with now is the only option people have is to end their lives violently or illegally by getting drugs or going through that system. And in this case, with this person in a long-term care facility, they don't have access to that. They don't have that choice. Irene, you're on News Talk 1010.
Yes, hi, Robert. I do agree with you. My mother has been suffering for years. She is in a long-term care facility, and it is so difficult to see her suffering like this. And I don't know. She wants to die, and it's very difficult to explain to her that God's not ready for her.
Yeah.
And she's suffering.
Well, and that's the other part of it, I think. I know there are religious components to the arguments against this, and that's fine. If your religion says it's not the thing to do, then that's between you and your belief in your God. If you don't have those beliefs, though, I don't think government should be standing in the way because of those kind of reasons. We should come up with a system and make it happen, because it's just inhumane what we do now. Coming up after the 8 o'clock news, I promise you we'll lighten it up. We're going to talk about a woman suing her husband because, he liked to party with hookers. Now she's got an STD, and she wants him to write her a big check. I think she's absolutely right. We'll talk about that coming up after the 8 o'clock news. I'm Robert Turner, in for Ryan Doyle.
The law basically favors bosses and favors owners of businesses when it comes to dealing with workers who expose things that are happening in the workplace that shouldn't be happening there. I know people who have been fired by the TTC, a public body, for complaining about asbestos at the Shepherd Young subway station. They got paid off, but we had to sue them. The bottom line is there should be legislation that says that any employee should have the right to publicly state and complain about conditions at a workplace that relate to fundamental issues of health and safety. There is no such law. It's a big omission in our legislation, and governments talk about it, politicians talk about it, but nobody does anything about it. Mm-hmm. And we need to protect people who expose unsafe working conditions, unsafe practices, illegal practices at the workplace. Every person knows that there's all kinds of companies that take shortcuts all the time because it's always profit, and they sacrifice safety, and they sacrifice the workers. They create situations of danger, and workers are forced to live with it, and they can't speak up. So I'm 100% in favor of a Protect Whistleblowers Act that'll have teeth in it.
Yeah, this isn't a province filled with South African diamond mines. I mean, most employers care about their employees.
There's dozens and dozens of workers that die. The Workers' Safety Insurance Board, there are unsafe practices. It's always out there in the big factories, in the small factories. Anybody who's involved in industry and construction knows that every single day there's not only occasional but regular systemic practices that are unsafe. I disagree with you. It's true in the 1940s and 50s, Canadian industry used to be a slaughterhouse. The Ontario Health and Safety Act has done a lot to alleviate that, but there are not enough inspectors. Too often you complain to the Ministry of Labour, and the inspectors end up going to the boss if you complain about unsafe work conditions. The Ministry of Labour doesn't have teeth, the law doesn't have teeth, and there's no spirit or will or desire to enforce safety legislation. That's why we need to protect workers directly who whistleblow.
Well, I know you talked to Oakley in the past about the undocumented worker situation in this city, in this province. Awarded custody of her in a very bizarre set of circumstances at family court. And we talked to Peter Cormos yesterday, who has filed, I guess, a complaint at the Ontario Judicial Council. First of all, you're not a fan of the Ontario Judicial Council, I'm sure, Harry Capito, because you're a maverick.
But you know, I have used Ontario Judicial Council, and I've used it against a family court judge by the name of Marvin Zucker, and he was found guilty of professional misconduct. Peter, the problem goes beyond this particular judge. It's true that she did not read the case. It's true that she didn't ensure that the voice of the child involved was heard. It's true that she didn't do what she was supposed to do. But it's not only this judge, it's the whole system. It's underfunded. If you go down to the family court on a Monday morning at 9:30, it's a zoo. 80% of people are represented. The children's lawyer has to be in 4 courts at the same time. The whole system is in crisis. And the judges it's got to be adequately funded. It's not just this particular judge. And you know what, Peter? The OJC, the Ontario Judicial Council, is a bit of a joke. It's made up of judges virgin judges except for one public representative. Not only that, they keep no records of which judge was found guilty of what. You have to order the transcript to find out what's happened. You know, if you want to talk about making a record or having an impact on judges' practices, the OJC doesn't do it. But Peter is more than the individual judge. The children's lawyer is not empowered to supervise. They can't do anything without a judge's order requiring them to speak for a kid. The judges, as I pointed out, there's not enough judges there, and you can see all kinds of overcrowded dockets. I can understand why this particular judge didn't have the time to read the case, but it happens all the time. Normally, when I've been in family court, the judges adjourn the case so they can read the file and then come back if they have the time to do it, if the docket isn't too crowded. So it's a systemic problem. It's an institutional problem, and it arises out of underfunding of the children's lawyer, underfunding of Children's Aid Society, and underfunding of the family court system in the Ontario Court of Justice. And that's what needs to be done. A political will to make a family court that's accessible and that's responsive, so that people who need it, people who need representation, don't need to pay $300 an hour to make sure that their rights under family law are protected and the children are protected.
All right, Harry, I know, and Cormos did not disagree with you there about the system being underfunded and 311 Jarvis Street being a nightmare at any time of the day. But this judge, God bless her, Harry, she didn't even read the file. She's got to take some accountability here.
I'm not, there's no question that her conduct in this case falls well below the standard that's acceptable for a judge dealing with fundamental issues involving family law. But it's endemic. It's not only this judge. They're overwhelmed. Don't just blame the judges. They're victims of the system as well. These guys, they're on the bench. These women are on the bench 5, 10, 15 years. They're basket cases. After they're there, all the pressures, all the intensity of the emotions, and without having enough judges there. So it's a situation that the government has created. Is she responsible? Yes. Are we all responsible? Yes. Is it also the failure of the Children's Aid Society that's endemically underfunded? Is it also the failure of a children's lawyer's advocate office, which by the way, has untrained people who don't know what they're doing half the time, which doesn't have any supervisory functions, which is just reactive to crises? It's a whole institution, CAST, the Children's Aid Society, the Children's Lawyer's Office, and the court system itself. They all bear blame, not only this judge, and this judge should not be singled out and made an example of without the full truth coming out. And also I can tell you, whatever happens with Ontario Court of Justice, they can very easily find this judge guilty of professional misconduct or gross negligence, and this judge can be removed, but the problem will still be there unless you deal with the fundamental underfunding of all the institutions that deal with children in the court system.
All right, you take a sip of your fluid. Did you have an extra egg this morning? What's with you? You on the Michael Phelps diet?
You know what?
You're full of it this morning.
You know where I'm going at 10 o'clock after the show's over?
Jail?
I'm going to a cottage.
Oh, Harry's in vacation mode, so he's getting the rest of his stress out here on the Oakley Show, 640 Toronto and Stafford for Oakley. I asked Peter Cormos yesterday about electing our judges. Of course, they do it in the United States, and judges it's said to be more accountable because, this isn't the kind of publicity, although it seems in Hollywood today, any publicity is what matters. But Harry Capito, I want to ask you about Jennifer Stoddard's proposal, the Information and Privacy Czar, if you want to call her that, is suggesting in a speech to the Canadian Bar Association that personal details, she's not convinced they need to be known to the world at large, certainly in the court records if you want to investigate who was that person who made that appearance on this particular charge. But she's worried with the spread of the Internet that it's just too easy for someone halfway around the world to find out what's going on in the Ontario Superior Criminal Courts.
Okay, the fundamental principle here is public access, public accountability, and public knowledge. The courts are public systems. Every record should be accessible. In the 1980s, I established precedents that allowed members of the public to be able to access information upon which search warrants are based. I had half a dozen different cases that raised that issue and touched on that issue. So I'm in favor of a public system, but in this case, I agree with the Information Commissioner. And that is because there's a tendency for people out there, a very powerful tendency, for them to assume that somebody was identified, especially in writing, must have done something. The presumption of innocence is an interesting theory, but in reality, people see the name of somebody on the internet newspaper, they assume they're guilty. So, the docket should be public, the court should be accessible, the written record should be there, but don't publicize somebody's social insurance number, somebody's address, and why put their name on the internet where 4 billion people can potentially see it? There's other problems, but we have to be realistic. In fact, it's very hard to enforce such a enforce information not appearing on the internet. We know all kinds of things that shouldn't have been publicized that have been publicized. The trial of the mass murderer, for example, in British Columbia, there were orders saying that should not be publicized. In the United States, all kinds of papers publicized it. You're talking about you can't enforce Canadian law outside of Canada. So in fact, you can say don't publicize these things. But a reporter from another country who comes to Canada, sits in the court, gets that information, he can publish it on the internet. It's a good. We should try to limit it. We should identify these people on the internet only by their initials, give them some privacy, prevent the slander of their names and the perception that they have done something guilty. But can we enforce it? That's a real question.
Now, and because she is a federal privacy, this would only affect federal courts and tribunals. But I mean, if the legislation is amended to take her up on her suggestion.
Well, obviously, if it's a good principle, it should apply to everything. People do get tried in the media. People do get found guilty in the media, and the real facts often get shoved aside or not explained fully. So protect people. Don't destroy their reputations. Recognize that the presumption of innocence isn't always operative. Isn't most of the time operative in people's thinking and people's minds. But let me tell you something. There's all kinds of people right now who do have the protection of the law when it comes to not getting their court proceedings publicized. There's legislation that prevents the name of a child involved in court proceedings. The young offender and also in family court, child family services. Also, every single time I've gone to court and tried to find out where a police officer who's being charged with an offense is being tried, the dockets all of a sudden disappear. The courtrooms all of a sudden disappear. These people seem to have an inside track into the administration of the court system. And when a police officer pleads guilty to something or is on trial, unless it's a high-profile case, it's sometimes very difficult to be able to find out which courtroom he's in or find out what's happening.
That surprises me, Harry, because I know there's nothing a cop hates more than a dirty cop.
A cop? Oh, man.
I would think they want to put these guys on parade.
The cops stick together like crazy glue. There's a thin blue line. A cop never does anything wrong. One cop does something wrong, and there's 1,000 cops right beside him saying he's the best thing since sliced bread. You gotta be kidding. I've spent my life every single morning, every single day when I was a lawyer, and even now suing and prosecuting police officers, and they all come behind them completely and totally. The whole system comes behind them.
Robert Wills wouldn't tell you that.
I can tell you the cops stick together. They back each other. It's an unwritten rule and an unwritten law. I once tried...
So do lawyers, so do bankers, so do judges.
Yes.
So do airline pilots.
Yeah, okay. So that's the word it's all about. But the police, they have a practice of sticking together more intensely and more closely when they're under attack than just about anybody else.
All right, now you bring up the music. We have a very specific process here and a procedure that we do with Harry Capito, Brandon, where we bring up the music and, not that music. Come on. This is what you do. You bring it up loud, and then we take it down very, very quietly because Harry's going to tell the folks where he can be contacted to help you out. Folks, Harry, where is it?
The law is like a spider web. It traps the weak and small, but the big and powerful tear it to shreds. Even the scorer. Call me Harry Capito, 416-533-3343.
And up it goes. There we go, Harry. Enjoy your cottage time, my friend, and we'll see you in a month or whenever John's away again.
In the morning. Quicker. North America hand-in-hand with Rogers Wireless, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Rogers Wireless. John Boyd.
Gamers, truckers, and small businesses are
4 liters for 100 already. I remember rope that ties you to your kid. That's a leash as far as I'm concerned. You can...
The story from the Bold is quite amazing. It will be the fastest BlackBerry out in the marketplace. And that's important because it's going to ride on Canada's fastest network. Not by a little, but by a lot.
Vice President of Research in Motion, Patrick Spence, says the focus is on the Bold's screen.
We've been working on this product for over 3 a good bath, a good scrubbing, and probably some sober rehab. You're talking about young, aggressive people on drugs in Chinatown, and it's become so out of control, the police told the Business Improvement Association there's not much we can do. So they hired some private security guards. And are they getting the support of the city? Of course not. The Police Services Board Chairman, Alec Mukherjee, said the business owners have a right to hire private security as long as they realize it's no substitute for police. They can't arrest anyone, says Mukherjee. They have no policing powers.
Now, more than ever, Toronto is an open city. There is an underground order in place, so many people from outside, from the old world, are moving in Canada, in Toronto. Montreal is at the center of a war between street gangs and mafia families. Toronto is a city with a lot of interest for criminal organization, and I think in the future we will see more people coming and placing themselves in Toronto.
And we're seeing, of course, it's not just the stereotypical, Southern Italian organized crime. Eastern Europe, I've heard stories that would bend your hair. They're so frightening about some of the viciousness of these new gangs that are appearing in Toronto.
Yeah, it's not like it used to be. Now I believe that there is more cooperation between criminals and drugs change the face of organized crime. They are more business-oriented people with a lot of money at their disposal, and people capable to build a connection with other criminals. You mentioned the Russians, Zakonia, but we have triads, Yakuza member, Colombian cartels, so many people that are moving in Canada, and they're building their empire, their connection because of the proximity of Canada with the United States, the proximity of Canada with Latin America, but most of all because Montreal is the main port of entry for narcotic business.
Well, I know, Antonio, that local authorities have their own, opinions and their own people working on this, but who's in charge of keeping an eye on this activity at the federal level?
But it's in charge of the RCMP or some combined forces. But I believe we don't have the right mentalities. 9/11 changed many things and moved a lot of the resources that we had focusing on organized crime to fight terrorism. And practically we lost important people, important players in the fight against organized crime that they built their experience and expertise over years and years of work, and now we have to start all over again from scratch, building intelligence, create new people with experience and expertise on this field, and on the other side, they never stop building experience and expertise and never stop dealing with narcotics and other criminal activities.
Antonio's website is nicaso.com, NICASO. It's always a pleasure, Antonio. Thank you so much.
And I had locked myself away in this unhappiness and anger and frustration and insecurity and fear. And so I was experiencing the feelings of being in a prison that was locked away, that felt that someone else held the key, where in fact it was me. I'm the one who held the key. And that's when I decided to break free and really passionately study personal development. And that's really where the journey began.
I want to talk a little bit about the Destiny Switch, because that was a huge bestseller, and it really came on the wave, I think, of all the books that spoke to the greater aspects that The Secret, opened up for us, but didn't quite touch on. Tell us a little bit about that and how we can find that within ourselves.
Yeah, so what I realized, just from my own experiences, as much as I've been studying a lot of this personal development stuff, there were times when I thought that it wasn't working. I mean, I'd reach points where I'd been into it for years and then just start to say out loud, this stuff doesn't work. And what I realized is that there's certain emotions that we can have, such as fear, that can act like a breaker switch that can just shut down all the good in our lives. And so if we think of our emotions as being on a dimmer switch that's on the wall, where we can turn it up to the highest level and illuminate all the brightness in the room, or we can push it all the way down to the lowest level and make everything dark. Our emotions are very much like that. So you take the emotion of love, and at the highest level, so your switch is on high, you're feeling and expressing and experiencing love. If it's on low, you're experiencing hate, or the opposite of, or sometimes some varying degree in between. So inside of your Destiny Switch, I created something called the scale scale of human emotions. And so I plotted our emotions onto the scale, 12 emotions, 7 different levels, to help people understand the nature and the power of their emotions, because it's our negative emotions that are going to cause us to shut down all the good. We're not going to be experiencing joy, or we're not going to be experiencing abundance in our life. And so the first thing I did was I went to the hardware store and bought a dimmer switch, a 4-panel dimmer switch, and I labeled them with particular emotions that I knew I needed to focus on in order to attract the things that I wanted into my life. I stayed focused on them every single day. I noticed where my own levels were. I would switch to more positive emotions if I noticed they were down at the lowest level. And so I practiced this in my own life, created some disciplines, and hence the book, Your Destiny Switch, was born. It was based on my own experience from using these skills, ideas, and techniques. Hold up my hand, people fill it with money. Now I can get on a bus and I go anywhere I want.
That is amazing.
Love that. It is amazing. He's an amazing guy, and what a great lesson I learned from him that day.
Well, you know what? It's funny because it's making me think about, the reason I brought up the third world country is that a friend of mine had just come back from a trip and said to me, we think wrongly over here that because a culture doesn't have the things we have, that they're not wealthy or happy. That in fact she had gone to this village and met these extraordinary people that had basically nothing compared to what we have, and they were a really happy community and interacting with each other and making things and stuff. It's like I think too that what we concern ourselves with so much stuff that we forget what real wealth and contentment really is. So that's why I asked, because I know your answer would be yes, right? Because in fact, these people, like if you read all your distinctions of wealth, it never says anything in here about what car you're driving, even though we can drive the Mercedes here, but they'd be happy with a really cute little donkey.
Sure, absolutely.
And they feel wealthy.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah,
Well, also I think, too, living in this society, especially in the West, that basically, you have to do something or do a work or a job or a career that you don't like. So we don't believe that we can make money doing what we love.
That's so true. You're absolutely right. And we're such habitual creatures. It's like we believe. I remember one time I was in Toronto. My son and I both motocross. We both have motocross bikes. And we'd gone down to this motocross park actually west of Toronto with some friends. And so there were 5 of us in this big truck together. We're pulling the trailers behind and we're coming back home. And there was a conversation about university. And they were asking my son, Michelle, who's 15, which university are you going to go to? And he said, well, I don't know. And they said, well, what do you want to be? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I said, you know what? Maybe Michelle won't go to university. It's not for everyone. What? Your son's not going to go to university? I can't believe you're saying that. You're his mother. And I said, you know what? University is not for everyone. If he wants to, great. He can. The thing is that we believe that there's a, sort of pattern that we all have to follow. I'm not saying it's a bad thing either. I'm just saying that it's not for everyone. He's a very entrepreneurial little guy. And, well, he's not so little anymore. He's taller than me. But, he may choose to do something else. What I believe is find what you're passionate about and pursue that. And if university can help you with that, then go for it. Get enrolled in the right program that's going to help you. And even if you don't, that's okay too. Go try some things and, see where it leads you. But what I noticed is just how adamant and how argumentative that this individual in the car became, because I was saying, it's okay, whatever. If we have a fund for him. We've been saving his little university fund since he was a baby. And the money will be there. If he goes, he goes. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But, we'll see.
Peggy, what do you have to say to our listeners? We have 30 seconds left with you.
Oh, okay. Well, the 21 Distinctions of Wealth is a system, by the way, so it's designed in a way that there are 21 distinctions. There's a chapter explaining it. Then there's affirmations I recommend you read every single day, 3 times a day. It takes 441 days to go through the book. But what it does is it really helps shift your consciousness to creating more abundance, feeling abundant, and attracting more abundance into your life.
And where can they find you?
They can find me at destinies.com. That's my website, destinies.com. They can get the book at any major bookstore or Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com.
Thank you, Peggy. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Peggy. My pleasure. Thank you, ladies.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Colette, what's interesting is that, Peggy was saying about a pattern, following a pattern, and what I call that pattern is we've been sold a bill of goods, that when we finally get what we need, we realize, this ain't the deal, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, I hear you. This is a great book, by the way. I hope the listeners take it seriously and go out and buy it. It's very helpful. Really, really works.
Well, the hour flew by, as usual. We've been lounging. It's been a nice lounging. We always love it around here.
Absolutely.
is up, and hopefully you'll join us again for more great guests and hot topics. I'm Natasha Dern.
And I'm Colette Barron-Reed.
And you've been listening to the Buddha Lounge on News Talk 1010 CFRB. Take care.
Didn't look at a child in the beginning. She gave her child away to someone that she knew obviously had a problem. Yeah. And now this woman, and it's terrible, they had an open casket for this child, everything.
We've gone over all of that, Kate. We've gone over that loads of times.
I know, but it's just so...
Okay, Kate, yeah, but Kate, we've done that over and over and over again. I mean, again, I said this before, but the talk radio thing, have you run over a puppy, road rage, and all that. We can do better than that. We're speaking specifically here about people who are splashing around in the suffering of this little girl. They're now protesting, and they're absolute hypocrites.
Do you think it was proper for the paper to run this picture of her? It's bad enough for the mother to be there. But you know what? This paper is making it so that this mother's going to do other kinds of things like that.
I think the role of a newspaper is to reflect the news, not to shape it. And this was news, it was happening. How could they not?
Well, they get lots of pictures every day, Michael, that they decide not to put on. And in this case, I think that, I hear what you're saying about shaping it, but in this case, I think they're just, giving this mother more press, which is clearly what she wants. She's just in the same position. This is a bit of a throw. She's in the same position as Obama's pastor. Once he got people in the national press going after him, he was out there going wild. And this woman is out there. This woman is out there. She got the national press, her picture everywhere, and now she's out there doing more things. It should be ignored.
It's one of those stories, if a child or a cute little animal, frankly, is... I know this probably sounds unfair, but if it's a little child or a cute animal, then there will be this reaction, and in media it plays and it plays and it plays, particularly if it's a puppy or a kitten. The point we're making here is that how dare they have the chutzpah to go out there and protest the judge, when the judge was really much later on down the scale. The first people to go wrong were the biological mother, her friends around her, the community, who now say, oh, we really cared. Very quickly to Rose on CFRB. Hello, Rose.
Yes, I just noticed the mother at the funeral. She seemed rather composed, more than I would like her to have been. And secondly, I really think that some onus has to be put on this woman. She can't just walk away from this. Something has to be done to show her that her choices were bad and she needs help.
I think she knows that now.
I do agree with you, actually. Her winking at the camera at one point during an interview, I thought was great. But she is a big kid, and goodness knows what's going on.
This has been an encore presentation of Two Ball Guys with strong opinions.
Just being yourself. I mean, I try to treat it like I had a, not necessarily, you don't want to downgrade it to a cold, but, treat it like you had a cold, and, you don't stop going to work, you don't stop doing the things that you love to do just because you have this illness. And then that was one thing that always helped me was, I went fishing, I went hunting, I did the things that I would normally do in the off season, work out, throw, and I think that helped me just keep my mind off of it and keep from sitting inside the house feeling sorry for myself.
How important was the support network, whether it was your teammates, parents, siblings, whatever the case may be? How important was that to you?
Very important. But I got to a point where I could only, hear or see get well soon cards, so much. So then you start feeling sorry for yourself again, and it's one of those deals. It's a fine line where you're proud that, or you feel good that people care about you and are concerned, but at the same time it's okay. I have this, and I don't want to have it. So let's go in the right steps of getting rid of it and going from there.
And as good as you are as a major league pitcher, you're darn good, obviously. Did you ever pinch yourself in terms of how smoothly your career in baseball has gone so far?
No, because it's not smooth. I mean, I'm having a good year, and that's great. But there's a lot of effort and a lot of work that goes into it, and continued work and effort that, down the road. So just been fortunate enough to put up good numbers, and being a part of the Red Sox helps. You got a good offense every night, and it helps.
You have 30 days in order to find suitable accommodations, and if you don't find a house in 30 days, that you can take your house off the market. And you've got yourself covered. Number one, it says that it's still conditional on financing from the purchaser, so that's usually good for a week. You've got inspection that's in there, and then you've got lawyers maybe who's going to be, looking over the offer and that. So you've got yourself at least 2 weeks, and then you buy yourself another 2 weeks that you go out there and you find a suitable accommodation. You've got more bargaining tools when you can go in and put an offer on a property that's firm, because you know how much money you're getting out of your house, and you also know that your house is sold. Yeah.
What are you seeing in cottage property now? I mean, there was a few years ago there where that was all you heard about, that cottage property.
7 days a week, which I choose, and I am not complaining. And I know it's a show about investing long-term, and your hosts are there to sell their products. I believe there are many different types of real estate agents. And in brackets, I know I've seen some of the ones that you're talking about. But like in your host business, I'm sure it has its share of agents that are not on top of their game. Thanks for your time, Paolo Zulian.
In case it was my comment that generated the email. Actually, the shot I was taking is at the clients. People need to be people need to understand that they got to be realistic coming into this. And if somebody comes in and you got a $300,000 house and they say, I can list that at $600,000. Why are you signing there?
Yeah.
You know, do you really think that the realtor can make that difference?
And it's funny because we weren't actually even taking shots at the realtor. We were saying that now there's such a huge demand that people need to actually use realtors. You know, I'm still seeing private for sales that are up. You know, it's like, what are they thinking? You know, you can't negotiate your own offer. You don't even know what the marketplace is going on and what's happening, and that, you know, whether you're overpriced or underpriced or whatever. You need that realtor to work more now than you ever have in probably the last 15 years. I'm telling you that right now. It's the realtor that's going to sell your house. It's not going to get done through MLS. How, though? Because they're the ones that know. They're the ones that are going to bring the two parties together. You've got somebody that's had their house for $400,000. You got someone that wants to buy for $300,000. Who's going to put and keep that thing going and that offer going in order to actually bring two parties together? You're saying it's down to the art of the deal at this time. All right. Absolutely. We're going to take another break. And Arlene Bynum will return in a moment. Power and Money, AM 640 Radio.
Bodies stacked. We guarantee they're going to be firm and full.
Sound independent financial advice. Call Alan Cameron of Investment Planning Council at 1-800-717-8117. Plan your finances and achieve your goals. Maximize your investment, retirement, and tax planning. To contact Alan Cameron at Investment Planning Council, call 1-800-717-8117 or online at alancameron.com. You're listening. Done in the past, what they're doing now, and what they plan to do in the future. And they should have testimonials from clients that you can actually make phone calls. How were they? Did they do what they said they were going to do? And they should also have a form of saying, listen, if you list with me, this is what I'm going to do for you. And even if they have listed a little bit high, they inform right on that. They're saying, listen, if we don't have X amount of showings in the first 2 weeks, I'm going to be calling you back, and I'm going to be setting up another meeting, and we're coming back to the table, we're having another discussion. And they come with what's sold in the area. That's so right. You know, and you see what's going on. And if you haven't had any showings, or if you've had 20 showings and you have no offers, then you're going to be coming back to the table again. And this is something that should be spelled out to the actual seller so that they know exactly what's going on. There are no surprises, and it's not like out of the blue. They've listed their house for $400,000, and a week later you got the agent calling you. Well, you need to do a price adjustment. Well, what have you done in order to advise me of why I need to do a price? People when they're selling their. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Me too, absolutely. Happy Labor Day. Yeah, absolutely. If you've been listening to Power and Money, you'd like to get in touch with Alan and Cindy. Alan is from the Investment Planning Council. You can send him an email, alan@alancameron.com, 1L, Alan, all those Allens, or call 1-800-717-8117, or log on to alancameron.com. Cindy Leithwood from Dominion Lending Prestige, 416-318-3635, or 1-866-466-4579. I'm Arlene Bynum, and I'll return at 2 o'clock this afternoon for Bynum's Toronto Weekend, the Sunday show, AM 640 Radio. This was Power and Money, a paid commercial program on AM 640. The opinions and advice on this show represent the views of the host and advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of AM 640.
She dealt with breast cancer and then lost my father. And it was as though she were questioning herself of whether she should just pack it in, give up, and go and join my father. But at the same time, she wanted to be around for as long as she could for her children and grandchildren. So, it was something constantly at odds within herself, I think. But, I think by the time she left, she was, she was comfortable with whatever she had decided.
Florence left, or perhaps decided to leave, this earth on December 16th, 2005. On her radio program, Florence used to announce deaths in the community and marked everyone's passing with a song that was special to them and to her.
I remember every time there was a death in our community or anywhere, she always used to send message to them, sending her condolences out to the people that were hurting at the time. And she always played this one song I remember is When God Comes and Gathers His Jewels, and it was sung by Hein Williamson. I always remember her when I hear that. When God comes and gathers His jewels, all His treasures, diamonds and gold, you'll meet her up there, up in heaven so fair. When God comes and gathers His jewels.
Florence Carpenter was, without a doubt, a jewel. To her family, to her people, to the mosaic of our country. Despite her efforts, the Quitchin language continues to fade. Most of the speakers are of Florence's generation, and the language is dying with them. In the not-too-distant future, all that may remain of the language is memories and archival records, including of one of its most passionate proponents, language keeper, Florence Carpenter. The documentary on Florence Carpenter was created by Peter Skinner in Yellowknife with help from Chris Harbert in Inuvik and Chris Meager in Whitehorse. The program featured excerpts from a documentary produced by Dave Miller of CBC North. Sean Ryan was our technical wizard. The series is produced by Mary Link. You can email us at The Late Show, all one word, at cbc.ca.
Spain, or going all the way back to Egypt, there comes this time when the world that you feel secure in, the world that you feel you're a part of, that you've worked hard to improve and to be a good citizen of, turns its back on you. At the very best, turns its back on you. That is the reality of exile. I mean, that was the part of the argument that led people to espouse Zionism, was the undeniable reality, the undeniable precariousness of always living in a place sort of at the pleasure or displeasure of the proprietors. And as much as I feel like an American, as much as I feel, that American history is my history, and as much as I feel both entitled to the benefits of American life and sort of responsible for its failures and shortcomings, I can't kid myself if I read about the way German Jews felt about themselves and Germany in 1890, it's kind of chilling, because that's exactly how they felt.
Would you call yourself a Zionist, or is this an implicitly Zionist novel?
I don't think so. I think it's open to interpretation. I think you could read it that way easily. I think you could read it as saying, look what happens when there's no Israel. Isn't this a dark vision of a world with no Israel in it? But I'm also well aware, having heard from them a little bit already, that there are people who view this book as being anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, and saying, look at this great thing that happens when there's no Israel. So the closer a work of fiction comes to approaching the state of reality, the more open to interpretation it's going to be. I'm not a Zionist in the sense that I don't think I would define myself as a Zionist, but I certainly do believe in Israel, support Israel's right to peacefully coexist there in that area. I don't have a moment's doubt, let me put it this way, that there's only one government in this world that can be trusted always to protect Jews, and only one government that can be relied upon not to stab Jews in the back, and that is Israel, and I don't have any doubt about that. So, to that extent, I suppose I might be considered some kind of Zionist, but certainly not, it's not the foundation of my politics by any means.
Michael Chabon, one of the more interesting and entertaining aspects of the novel is the way in which you give the Yiddish language an everyday currency, adapted to life in the North, from place names to brand names, the shofar, cell phone, or contemporary slang. The Jews of Sitka refer to the American Jews as Mexicans. The Mexicans, in turn, one of my favorite lines, refer to the Sitka Jews as the frozen chosen. The Jewish culture transplanted in Sitka has in turn transformed the city into a place both ordinary and strange. What to you are the greatest charms of your fictional Sitka?
I think it's got this lively, transplanted sort of Middle European culture of concert halls and chess clubs and it's a highly literate place. People love to go to the movies in Sitka because the weather's so terrible. It's nice to be inside watching a movie. And I think there's a sort of cozy, jumbled, huddled together on the edge of this sort of between these huge mountains and this vast ocean. You've got all these people just sort of tumbled together, living very closely together in this long, narrow strip of land. I think it produces a kind of familial feeling that, like, as with any family, is also sort of prone to conflicts and fissures and so on, but there's a kind of we're all in it together element to it as well.
And the early settlers are referred to as polar bears.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of this is a world of people who are masters of, not merely masters of irony, but masters of self-irony. And so in referring to themselves as polar bears, that generation, the first